Go ahead and start the recording. So, welcome to the CHAOSS OSPO Working Group meeting for October 2nd. As always, this is a CHAOSS meeting, so it does fall under our code of conduct. So, be kind to each other. And with that, share my screen, we can all see the agenda, and let's so have on the agenda, I really just wanted to mention, not really going to talk about it because we've talked about it, I think, in the past, but we have a new practitioner guide around assessing ability that's ready for review and comment. I would love to get feedback from, in particular, people who work in OSPOs about this topic. This is it should look familiar for those of you who've run around. This is pretty metrics models and posts and a guide. So, so some of that content should look pretty familiar if you've been around for a while. If not, it'd be great to have some fresh feedback as well. So I would encourage you to. So we have two things on the agenda for today. We have a discussion about demonstrating and measuring business value, and this has come up in through a couple of different paths, right? So there's been some discussion in the to-do group because there's a group within to-do that is looking at open source and business, and they've been looking at some metrics around that. We also recently released a practitioner guide that's about demonstrating the organizational value of your open source efforts. So we have that as well. I'm actually giving a talk about that in Lyon at the OSPOlogy event at the very beginning of next month. So it's about a month away. So it's something I've personally been thinking about a lot. So I'm curious what experiences other people have. I think Rashida, maybe you have been a bit involved in some of the to-do group discussions. I don't know if anybody else has, but I don't know if you want to maybe talk a little bit more about those discussions as well.
Well, I actually just joined the to-do group Slack. So I'm fresh. I'm here to learn and I'll chime in wherever I can, but I'm really just absorbing the information right now.
Okay, fair enough. Has anybody else been involved in any of those discussions in that Slack channel in the to-do group?
Yeah, yeah, it's Victor. I'm
Oh,
calling from a
Victor.
hotel.
Hey,
Yeah,
yes.
I'm calling from a hotel right now. So yeah, we've been discussing about business value in that group. There's a couple of related initiatives. One is just that one group discussing so far has been like qualitative side of the business value. Nothing, there's not much into the matrix yet. The second part come from actually another initiative. There's a report created by Linux Foundation for business kind of a startup. It's not about business value, but about like for startups, like how it's basically proof that for a startup adopting open source software can give them greater potential values, for investors for acquisition target. So, and then last couple of weeks in the business value discussion, we discussed about that, and then also discussed about how to do the business value, not only qualitatively but also quantitatively. How do you, what metrics do you need? How do you put into numbers, right? And similar to what the other group has been doing, the research on startups. But how about established company, right? Established company is not about acquisition target. It's more about how do you evaluate company? Not as not for acquisition target, but probably for like stock market value, right? How do we put into yeah, but what kind of matrix? We acknowledge that there's actually a pretty good report by Augston. I forgot his name, how to pronounce his name. He has written some nice blogs which go you can find it in the Slack there, which goes through how to map the business value to the to open source matrix, and also during the discussion we all agree that it is pretty hard, not something we can do in the near future, to actually map the how to value a like established company value to the actual open source matrix. The main reason for that is that so far the matrix collected, no matter it's here or in the to-do group, is all bottom up. Right? You all go measure the matrix in the open source community, look at the GitHub values. Those are all bottom up analysis. To be able to do that from a business perspective, that's like important to the board member, to the CEO, CIO, etc. That's a top-down approach. So yeah, I think it's an interesting thing that we should do, and we already started doing that in that group. But it's not something we expect to be able to achieve, any substantial goal in the near future.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Victor. I can say, my approach to this has always been a bit more, um, how should I describe this? So one of the things that's really important when you're demonstrating value and doing things like this is being able to map it to what your organization cares about, right? Because if you can't talk about the efforts that you're having in open source in a way that your executives see value in it, where they're actually the open source efforts are mapped to the company's goals and strategies. If you don't do that, then it's really hard to show the value. And so that's something that I always tend to think about. And in my experience, when I've done that, it's been a lot less about numbers. So there's generally some numbers involved, but it's more about the story that you tell to executives, where you can talk about how the work that you're doing maps to the organization's goals, the organization's strategies. This is what I did when I was at Pivotal and I was working on our Kubernetes strategy. Being able to justify getting people working on upstream Kubernetes involved being able to tell executives why doing this would help us achieve our long-term goals as a company. And a lot of that was based on like long-term product strategies and where the products were going and the bits of Kubernetes that we were going to need to influence, features and bug fixes and things like that. But it was more of a storytelling approach. I'm curious what others think, because we've certainly got some OSPO veterans on the call.
Yesterday, I was talking to the OSPO committee that we've formed at Geico, and we were actually going through how we can show business value to, VPs and things like that. And I think how you put it, like, yes, the numbers are important, but also coming from a perspective of a contributor, like how do we attract talent, you know, and tell a story as an engineer who wants to contribute on behalf of a company. Like, what would that look like for them? So I think that piece of storytelling will definitely come into play, and taking a note on that for sure. I think that's a good approach.
Yeah, because one of the things that I've seen way too many people do, I've seen OSPOs do this, I've seen individual engineers do this, is where they talk about the work that they're doing in open source as benefiting the greater good. It's for the good of the community, which to executives sounds like charity, which sounds like not something they're going to spend money and engineering time on. And so you can still do that, but that's not how you justify it to executives. The other thing I see a lot of is people counting things that are easy to count. So, numbers of commits, numbers of PRs, numbers of, whatever. And what that tells executives is, look, we're spending lots of effort on this thing. So we're spending lots of engineering time, but we still haven't demonstrated the value. We still haven't demonstrated what the executives care about. Emma, I saw you briefly go off mute. Was there something you wanted to add?
Oh, that was mistake, but I'll just say I was nodding to what you were just saying. Um, yeah, because counting numbers like especially pull requests or contributions can actually be a concern if and some people actually hide their contributions or say like, oh, I only want these contributions to show because like it's part of my job, but I haven't really had the sign off to do it. So being able to align that with business value, I mean, at Microsoft that was everything security, probably still I'm not there anymore, but if you could just align it with security in some capacity, and then there's the actual security work, but then there's also kind of things like having a seat at the table right now with the XE exploit, like then that's the storytelling that you're talking about, Dawn, right? Like, we're watching what's going on and we're, not that it's a spy game, but you know what I mean? Like it's being there. So it's tricky, but just really keeping that North Star of the business goals and crafting that in that way is helpful. Counting the right things.
Ria, did you have something to add?
I'm just wondering if there's a generational issue here, because there was a generation before whoever the current executives are that were deathly afraid of using open source and didn't want to see it in their company. Everything had to be built here, everything had to be proprietary. And then open source went on a campaign to convince everyone that yes, it's okay to use open source. It's great. Use it. It's there for you, and got baked in the head that it's a free resource at some point along the way. And now those people grew up, became executives, and still have that mentality. And so convincing them now that they should actually be investing in this thing seems to be trying to undo years and years ago of baked in, but it's free.
Yeah, I think that's certainly a certain challenge because as we all know, open source is not free. You need to spend time configuring things, keeping up with bug fixes. You'll find bugs that you might need to fix. You'll find missing features that you want to contribute back. And that's the best way to have influence in a project is to actually have people contributing to it. So I think a lot of the um, I think a lot of the leadership that really gets open source is starting to get this because we're certainly seeing a lot more of it. I mean, when I first started working in open source and when I was at Intel in the early 2000s, all of the conversations were around why open source really isn't as scary as you think it is. And we don't have those conversations anymore, right? We don't have those conversations about how scary open source is from like a licensing and contamination of um, contamination with their proprietary code. We just don't have those conversations anymore. We've gotten past that, but now we have all kinds of new conversations.
I like the point you raised about influence, because I think executives like to have influence. So if you can measure and quantify or tell a story around the influence you will gain by meaningfully engaging in a project, that might be something that would resonate with executives.
Yeah, in particular for those open source projects that are really strategic to your organization, right? So when I was at VMware, we had a list. We called it the strategic projects list, and we've kind of framed this in the demonstrating organizational value guide as the critical projects. But these were the projects that were, so you look at our dependencies, and there were, I don't know, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of open source projects that VMware consumed, but there were a couple dozen that were super strategic. These were the ones that our products were built on top of, the ones that if it went away the next day, it would influence our ability to deliver products and services to customers. And those are the things that the companies are starting to think about is some of these open source projects that are absolutely critical to the organization and how you stay involved in those projects and contribute back to them and be able to to influence the future direction. And also being able to see warning signs, right? If there's stuff going on within the project as well, I think that can help. Other thoughts?
I maybe one thing, because we've been looking. I work at CERN, the particle physics lab, and we've been looking at this for kind of showcasing the value to member states and funding agencies. And I find that it's well, on one hand, in our situation, it's a bit difficult to capture actually what the amount of contribution out there is. So for this, we're working with Software Heritage to mine basically their data and try to extract a more quantitative, let's say, analysis on this. And then on the other hand, we are trying also to, as you were mentioning before, to look for stories that would impress managers and funding agencies. So I don't know, it's a small project that was born from a contributor here and then it's adopted outside and this kind of stuff. So we're still trying. So we have this project that is about to finish, and I think they'll publish something. I have actually a catch-up meeting tomorrow for about this. So maybe we'll be able to share a little bit the methodology and the kind of questions that we find relevant. And on the other side, talking to like executives and managers, I find that like reports like the Linux Foundation ones and things that look like super professionalish and in CIO speak, they help a lot. In fact, I mean, we practitioners tend to kind of dismiss them as something that doesn't speak our language, but in fact is super interesting for CIOs to see the little arrow going up or down and the cost going up or down, this kind of things. So it's probably a necessary evil. I don't know.
Yeah, I shared a whole bunch of the document that it's definitely not so simple, because I think the comment earlier about the different perspective when it comes to from Sean, the rules for selling it to exactly the same in Europe. Definitely, it will be different. It will be also different in Asia, different in Africa. Not only because of like just the traditional different accounting rule, different way of thinking of regulations, etc. But there's also differences in new technology adoptions and the politics, everything. So it's not so simple for sure. But I think that's why it makes it interesting, though, because this is something that I think the company are trying to figure out, right? Because if you look for if you do Google search for AI governance, for example, just one aspect of it, they are starting in, I believe, 2021 or 22. SEC basically says, at least in US, any company listed in US stock market, the board member are now required to know AI security, AI governance. So it's yeah. So, but the company who go to the open source community and learn together at higher advantage over those who don't, like have closed doors, right? So those are beyond the traditional accounting rules, the traditional theory anymore. So yeah, I think it's an interesting topic. I believe once we start getting this discussed in the public, we potentially can get a lot of guest speakers from all those top business schools about how to evaluate companies and what they are evaluate. Have they considered any of this new technology advances? Especially AI is replacing everything, right? If you talk to the Harvard Business School professor, he has ways to evaluate a company's value, give it a number, right? But and stock price. But how about AI? Has he considered that or not? So all those are interesting questions that I think worth looking into.
Yeah, you said something a few minutes ago, sort of at the beginning of that thread where you were talking about kind of the geopolitical landscape and how that's changed. And I think one of the things that's really impacting open source, particularly here in Europe, is conversations around digital sovereignty and data sovereignty, where a lot of the European governments don't necessarily want their software and their data being hosted in the US by these big US companies because of the regulatory and legal environment.
Yeah,
And
that's
so,
the point I made
so
in chat.
go ahead, Sean.
That's the point I made in chat that Victor was responding to, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I've lost my chat window. Um, but yeah, so that's one of the big, one of the other values that people are seeing around open source is around this digital sovereignty.
Yeah, when I was at Aspology at the end of March in the Netherlands, that was the principal topic of discussion.
Yeah. It's the principal topic of discussion in just about every open source meeting I go to here in Europe.
That
For sure.
doesn't surprise me at all. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah,
know why. I don't feel like in Canada we're having that enough. I feel like I see it all in Europe. I need to find out who to start harassing about that.
Other
This
thoughts? Oh, go
chaos
ahead.
probably goes without saying, but the health analytics that go with the strategic projects, to your earlier point, Don, I think that can make a very compelling story. That the other issue that open source has, per your example with VMware, that you have tens of thousands of dependencies, it becomes such a huge problem that then executives might just be hands off. I can't deal with this. This is just too insurmountable a problem to even tackle. But if you get it down to 5 to 10 projects that are really game changers, and then find out that the health analytics that go with those projects are in some way less than desirable, then that could be a compelling call to action.
That was something we did a little bit about, was to grouping, although it was for our own projects, we could certainly do it for your dependencies, is to create cohorts type labeling for projects to use. So think about some specific attributes of, like, one we focused on was one maintainer projects, and there's sort of like those who seemed to be the primary contributor, who were under personal email. I mean, this was for something a little bit different than viability, but I think if you can think about grouping your projects into, or classifying those, and then telling, that's one way to do it with a lot of dependencies that we tried in the past.
Well, that's a good technique. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, we did a lot of it for our own to kind of figure out like management of our own, but it also applies to those that you're using, or can be used in that way as well. In that particular case, we're just looking to kind of look for the risk in that group, or fund them, or figure out what, was going on specifically. So, but that was helpful. It's a little bit of guesswork because we're just using quantitative, but the next step could be to, send out some questions or whatever.
Any other thoughts on this topic?
I was thinking a little bit about almost A/B testing, but I can't imagine a company actually going for this, where you try to develop the thing by yourself and figure out how many dev hours that takes, versus you glue it all together and they have access to open source, and see how many dev hours that takes. And that would make, I've seen some studies where they talk about, if you took a Linux out of the ecosystem, it would cost $8 trillion for it to be replicated, or some ginormous number. But doing it on a smaller scale, to say, hey, I need to have an encryption algorithm. So instead of using OpenSSL, I'm going to code an encryption algorithm, or buy an encryption algorithm, and what the differences in those costs are. that could be a potential way to prove it. But I'm really having trouble imagining a company allocating the bandwidth or resources to do that type of study. Maybe that's something the Linux Foundation could do.
I've worked for companies that are cash rich, like divisions of Elsevier on tech projects, and they will fully fund two competing projects and then pick the one that does the best because they just have so much cash they can afford to do that. I've never worked with another company that's done that though.
So we need to find a cash-rich company and have them do that study.
Yeah, pretty much.
Are there any cash-rich
I
companies?
want to find one of those.
Elsevier is still cash rich, I'm pretty sure.
Okay. Any final thoughts on that topic before we move on to the next agenda item?
Just say, not sure how this group works, but I think the business working group, their next step will have something actually published probably in the next few months, but that will be like still kind of traditional business value discussion, open source, but we will continue down the road in that working group to at least qualitatively discuss the basically what can we do to extend that the Linux Foundation report from business value of a startup to a business value more broadly to even like companies listed in the stock market. So, so Don, I don't know how the two group overlap and collaborate. That's something probably need to discuss sometime.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that. And we're always happy to have you folks come in and give us updates on what it is that you're doing and how it's working and kind of what you're thinking about, because these are topics that are really relevant, I think, to both groups. So we're happy to have you in this group. I don't know if you want to maybe post in the notes or in the chat or something with the details about how to join your working group if there are people who are interested in participating in the to-do group one as well. Is that working group open to anyone, or is it open only to to-do group members?
Interesting question, because I'm in both Slack, so and
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
individual, so I believe
Yeah,
it's open.
I used to be on the to-do group steering committee actually, and I know that there are some groups that some things the to-do group hosts that are open to anyone, like the OSPOlogy Live events, for example. And then there are others that are only available to to-do group members. So maybe if you could find that out and just let me know, that would be helpful.
I'll do that. In the meantime, I'm pretty sure you can join the to-do group without any membership question. I'll post the link to the Slack channel.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can join the Slack channel for sure. Cool.
I'm sorry, I have to leave. I just sneaked in without any prior, but I'll try to join regularly if I can. On Thursday is a bit complicated, but okay. Thank you very much. It was really interesting.
Awesome.
I will listen to the rest of the presentation and discussion. Cheers.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to the next item, the new AI alignment working group. So I don't know, Emma, do you want to maybe kick that off? Tell us a little bit more about what's going on there and how people can participate.
Yeah, sure. So it's very early days, but there is a new AI alignment working group and that is on Slack. And the purpose or I guess what kicked it off, or Sean and I were talking about specifically AI, alignment in AI. And I'll just say a couple of things before I introduce it more, is that, this is a space we're all learning and trying to figure out how it applies to our businesses, our lives, the things that we're responsible for in companies. And so when I talk about alignment in AI, because one of the things we realized earlier that people might be talking about it different ways is kind of the standard definition, which means like how well does the AI align with the things that I need it to do? Is it lying to me? Is it just taking something and running in the wrong direction? Is it reliable? Is it safe? Is it helpful? So that AI is acting on behalf of the user in a way that aligns with kind of humanity. Now, which humans is, alignment with which humans is a whole other category that we're not really touching. But just in the scope of kind of open source, is AI aligned with open source and all the things that we've built and know and through metrics, kind of value and evaluate. So AI alignment is the specific challenge of getting AI to do the right things. And then there's another kind of overlap that people hear about, and I hope I'm not, there might be someone who has more experience here, but I'm just describing how I know safety in AI is a broader term for alignment in AI, but it more specifically addresses things like security, privacy, fairness, bias, interpretability, containment, so it doesn't end the world kind of thing at the
Yeah.
worst scenario. So AI safety is the whole field of making AI systems safe. And then alignment is that it does the things we want to do. They're both considered alignment, but they're kind of used interchangeably out there. But we've named the working group AI alignment. Now, we're not trying to solve all of these problems, but rather ask the question is how can chaos metrics, so and kind of the open source work more broadly, influence alignment, influences field of AI alignment. And so specifically focusing on open source, an example might be if I go to Claude seems to be the agent I use a lot, and I type in, is X a healthy open source project? It'll come back with kind of some impressive information that sounds true and in many cases is true, but it's not really clear to me what metrics, to use that word, it's applying to evaluate that. Like it sounds good, and AI is very good at sounding good. I mean, it's always telling me how I have great ideas, right? And so I just when I listened to like a podcast and I was trying to figure out, well, how would I ask an agent to answer this question, but according to, the chaos metrics for inclusive leadership or and I know this is, I'll let Sean also speak.
Yeah.
Like the quality of code is, there's so much slop going in repositories. Is that also of a high quality according to some set of metrics that CHAOSS has? So I feel like it would be a shame that AI alignment and safety wasn't building on all of the work of the open source community after the last 20 years. And I'm specifically interested in kind of more of the safety space, like digital, the safety in digital spaces, kind of all the code of conduct stuff we've been doing over the years. And then Sean, maybe you can elaborate there. So
Yeah, I mean, I think that this actually came up in the original sort of kernel of where this comes from. In my mind, comes from like a conversation we had like 3 or 4 years ago about the appropriateness and safety of using machine learning more generally.
yeah.
And I think how we use AI or how AI is used right now, it's just kind of like a rush to the technology. And I think these ethical considerations are very important. And I think they get to the OSPO concerns when you start to think about all of the code that people are generating using AI tools right now. And I promise you, not fully checking before they run it. And so there will be
Yeah.
all of these issues that are not discovered in released software that start to cost companies money. And then
Yeah.
the companies will have trouble maintaining that code. So like there's a fiduciary problem with the rush to this AI as well from a corporate perspective, because I promise you they're generating a lot of things they're going to have to fix later. And the cost of doing that isn't going to be trivial.
Yeah. Definitely from the OSPO perspective. I mean, before I left Microsoft, it was like use AI for everything kind of thing. Like that's,
Right.
and so, it's very possible that engineers are just asking Claude or, like these sorts of things, or building with code assistance, one of my experiences has been that it's, putting secrets or right in the code, or, like authenticating using client side. There's just a lot of things, and then I'll say something like that needs to go in the environmental file and be in the git ignore, and it'll say, oh, you're absolutely right. So, there's lots of risks for companies. I totally agree with you, Sean, and I
Yeah,
feel like it's an opportunity for CHAOSS to showcase the work that we've been doing over the years.
yeah. And that was my way of also saying you explained it very well, and I had little to add.
Yeah, no, that was great. Yeah, but we agree we're all learning, and I'll just add a couple of things and we also have Coraline joining us. If you don't know Coraline, she is the kind of the author of the Contributors Covenant that's in most repositories, and she's very interested in that space too. But we realized that as a group, we need to figure out a mission. Is it that we want to create our own AI tools, right? Like create a library of MCP servers that you can connect metrics to, or is it that we want to just talk about this space, or is it that we want to explore different kinds of metrics, like actually the development of new metrics that measure AI alignment in open source? And we're not sure yet. So we need to align first as humans before we can align the AI, is kind of where we are right now.
Yep, agree. I think that's it, Don.
Yeah, we're just
Intro.
getting going. Join us.
Any questions?
Perspectives.
Any questions for Sean and Emma about the AI alignment group? Okay. Any other topics? I don't see anything on the your agenda item here section, but if anybody else has any other topics. Okay. Just a couple of reminders. There's if you happen to be in and around Madrid, there's a digital resilience forum that's, I'm on the organizing team along with a bunch of people from Bitergia. It should be interesting getting back to the digital sovereignty stuff that we were discussing earlier. OSPOlogy Lyon, I will be there talking about demonstrating business value. Sean, I think you'll be there along with Miguel Angel from Bitergia to talk about CHAOSS tools. And it looks like a really good event. It's also free if you happen to be. Both of these are free: the Digital Resilience Forum and the OSPOlogy Lyon. And you could combine them if you wanted to come over and do one trip and then spend, Halloween in Europe. Halloween's not really a big thing in Europe. Maybe more so in Madrid. They do a whole like Day of the Dead thing.
That'd be so fun.
Would be.
All right. And then there's also, oh yeah, go ahead.
Have we ever had a talk about the digital sovereignty? Because I've seen a lot of that being focused on in papers and some of the stuff coming out of the different working groups for the European Union Cyber Resilience Act. So clearly, you mentioned that it's in every meeting that you're attending in Europe. So that's an area that I'll say, as an American, I'm maybe not as educated on, that it would be interesting to learn more about.
I would also like that. That would be interesting topic.
Specifically around the CRA and
Well,
digital
I think
sovereignty
you
in
could touch the
general.
CRA, but I think it probably bleeds into more than just the CRA. That's just where I have been seeing digital sovereignty come up, and trying to understand via the CRA what the goal really is. There's a lot in the CRA that is still very ambiguous. So that's kind of its own rabbit hole, but just understanding, taking a step back to understand what are the goals of digital sovereignty, how does open source play into that? That might be an interesting topic.
Yeah, and what people are doing, like examples of different kinds of businesses approaching it. I think that would be very interesting. Maybe there's papers on that too. I'll read them.
Yeah, I haven't done a ton of investigation into it, but it just tickled my brain when you were talking about that.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I certainly know some people who could talk to us about that. Go ahead, Sean.
Oh, I was just gonna say that the context for where I've heard it is are these OSPology meetings, and the way that it was framed there is that the EU for over a decade has had digital sovereignty as one of its strategic priorities.
Mm-hmm.
Actions in the United States made that strategic priority something that everyone started to kind of act on en masse.
Yeah.
For reasons that I think we all understand.
Yeah, that's exactly true. Absolutely. Cool. Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, I could talk. Maybe someone like Mirko Bohm could come in and talk to us because he's pretty involved in this space. I'll see.
I
I
mean,
think even
Europeans,
the US is concerned about this to some extent. I'm thinking about the TikTok
we should be.
deal.
We should be more concerned about it than we are.
It's a fair point. I mean, like, I don't know that the TikTok deal is a shining example of this because I think it just went from, a foreign power to now an oligarchy that's controlling it.
Yeah.
But that's not necessarily a really great example of digital sovereignty, but some of
Well,
those concepts I think played into it.
sovereignty in more of a government control frame.
Yeah. But
Who's
I
the
think the goals of European digital sovereignty are a
yeah,
little bit more cohesive and more freedom oriented.
yeah, I mean it's less focused. I mean, it's a response to y'all are crazy. Really.
and the future of that, not to go down a rabbit hole, and that is like the statement from the White House about open models, but they have to follow a certain, I hate the word ideology these days, but that was in the post but it's open, and so it's sort of contrary to what openness is, and so there's kind of that worry about definition of open, I think, in some of the chats I've been having being altered. So I think there's a lot of motivation, not just for where we are now, but what we're building for the future.
Your doggy's adorable, Emma.
Well, she was like at my leg for so long, and I finally had to just pick her up. It's dark and raining out. She needs loves.
I think there should be more pets and kids in Zoom calls. That's one of the things I
Definitely.
liked about the pandemic when, when people were in lockdown and everyone was working from home. All the pets and the kids. So cute. Okay, sorry. One more reminder. FOSS Backstage, the CFP closes October 27th. That is if you haven't been to FOSS Backstage, it's an open source conference that's focused on all of the things around open source that are not necessarily writing code. So it's focused on things like community, compliance, and it tends to be very friendly for CHAOSS type talks. So it's a good one if you haven't been before.
Where is that one?
Berlin.
Oh, okay.
I'm going for FOSDEM this year, so that's gonna be my European trip.
Ah, very good. Yeah, I should add this as a reminder. So CHAOSScon is the Thursday before FOSDEM.
Okay.
I think
So
FOSS is starting their call for papers for anyone doing that.
Oh, have they?
they've started their call for developer rooms, which is the
Oh,
first
okay.
room. And so once the developer rooms get accepted, then all of those open their call for papers or proposals. And that's when you can start actually submitting talks to FOSDEM. The CHAOSScon CFP is going to be open soon, probably next week. We're working on getting that out.
I'm feeling like end of next week is about right for sure.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Thank you so much. This was a fun meeting. We had lots of good topics, and thanks everybody for coming. And I hope to see you all again in 2 weeks.
Thanks for hosting, Dawn.
Thank
Take
you.
care. Thanks, everybody.